Welcome everybody to the Japan panel of the Asia Business Conference. My name is Jordan Siegel. I'm a professor at the Ross School. I do research on global strategy with a focus on East Asia. And we have 5 distinguished panelists, all of whom are leaders in Japanese business. And so I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. And then we're going to have a set of questions for the panel, and then we're going to open it up for student questions near the end. So without further ado, let's start with the introductions of the panelists. If we could start, first of all, with Ms. Oto, if you could lead us off.
Thank you, Professor. My name is Yoko Oto. I am a founder and representative director of CASC Corporation, which is an independent consulting firm to offer CFO on demand. And I can talk about this a little bit later. But before this, I worked for several global leading brands such as General Motors and WPP advertising agencies and Uniqlo. The last job was with LVMH Moet Hennessy Diageo, which was a French-oriented company. So I have experience in Japan, Asia, US, and European culture in business. Now, one comment is my career change. It's definitely impacted, and my success was probably the MBA from Michigan. It did give me a very strong credit. I was nothing but a Japanese woman from outside of Tokyo, but credibility from the University of Michigan did change my career path, I think. So good luck to all of you who are still in student.
Wonderful. And then Nomura-san, if you could introduce yourself next.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Yoshimi, Ross MBA class of 2016. Thank you for having me today. I am a director of partnerships at a VC firm called DNX Ventures in the Bay Area. And now in my role, I connect cutting edge startups and large corporations to create new business opportunities. And I work with companies in not only the US and Japan, but also European companies and also other companies from Asia as well, from here in Silicon Valley. And prior to Ross, I was with a trading firm for 9 years in Japan. And I did sales, accounting, and corporate planning back then. And I was one of very few female professionals at the firm at that time. The reason why I decided to get my MBA in the US was because I wanted to hone my business skills in a global situation, meaning outside of Japan, and make my way to become a global business person. As a Japanese born and raised woman, this was a pretty big shift. And at Ross, I tried a little bit of everything, including an international map project with a social impact venture company in India. And I did an internship at a pharma startup in Singapore. And I also led the Japan trek with other Japan Business Association classmates as well. So I had a really good time, both academically and socially at Ross. And after my MBA, I decided to leave my company and try to find a job in the US. And I have a lot of stories here too, but long story short, I landed where I am right now with a lot of networking, handshaking, and sleepless nights and support from friends and Michigan alumni. Happy to share more later. Thank you for having me today.
Wonderful, thank you. And then Mr. Ariga, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, let me pull up my slide here. Can you see the chart?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Makoto Ariga, class of 1993. I used to be one of the facilitators of this very panel 30 years ago, and also a panelist 20 years ago. So it's good to be back. I've been in the business for 40 years. I've done a lot of things throughout the industries of steel, automotive, IT, fashion, and I've been CEO of a fashion brand, but most recently in the field of human resources, currently working for a company called Nihon M&A Center, which is mergers and acquisitions consulting firm. I happened to receive a Japan HR Award last year for developing the young professionals. And also I'm a singer in a band. I couldn't make a living out of music, so I'm wearing ties and jackets weekdays. There are some people that changed my life, and I'm not gonna touch on everyone, just one, CK Prahalad, corporate strategy guru, and originator of the concept core competence. This was the last class of the MBA program. He said to us that you'll be graduating tomorrow and going out the door, going back to the corporate world. You have discussed our case studies like if you were the CEO, but when you go back to the corporate world, you are a middle manager at best. And you will have your boss, your seniors. There may be some people trying to trip you and trap you, but I don't want you to get trapped in the corporate political things. I want you to be leaders, stick to your belief, and don't try to cling on to an organization. You are Michigan MBA, my disciples. Be a leader, hold to your belief. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, great. Mr. Shimoda, next, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Professor, and thanks very much for having me today. So my name is Sato Shimoda, a senior producer of Nikkei. So Nikkei is a Japanese financial media group which mainly provide financial and economic news and topics to our 2.8 million readers via newspaper, magazine, digital media, events, and so on. So globally, it is well known as a parent company of the Financial Times in the UK, so which we acquired in 2015, 5 years ago. So I myself have a long career as a journalist and editor in Nikkei, and have been mainly covering with macroeconomy or financial and economic policy, financial market, and global news reporting. So I've spent total 8 years outside of Japan in my career, including the European correspondent based in Brussels and the vice president and Nikkei Overseas subsidiary in London and in New York. So I currently responsible for creating new media business, and I'm now focusing on organizing webinars, especially after the spread of novel coronavirus. So my title, senior producer, might be unique position specific to newspaper company, and he or she have to decide everything by himself or herself. So in my case, when I'm organizing a webinar, I need to firstly decide the title and topics, and then look for specialists for the panelists, ask company for sponsorship, and plan the detail of the debate program, and on the day manage the webinars as the moderators, write an article about the discussion, and finally report the effect and income to Nikkei's board members. So it's a kind of in-house entrepreneur. It's very tough, but very interesting for creating new media contents and organizing webinar from scratch. So time must be up. So thank you very much. It's my pleasure to see you on Zoom conference, and thanks again for having me today. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And then Mr. Yahara, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Professor. Hello, everyone. My name is Shiro Yahara. I'm a president CEO of a Pioneer Corporation. Pioneer is well known for home audio, but now we are focusing on the in-car infotainment systems such as car navigation, car audio, $3 billion in revenue, 12,000 employees worldwide. Actually, Pioneer sponsored a map project last year in our operation in Ohio, and I was impressed with recommendations made by the team. And by the way, I'm an MBA class of 1993, so same as Yoko and the Mac. And actually, MAP project was first implemented to us for the first time in the U.S. business school. And I cannot believe that this program has continued for more than 30 years, almost 30 years since then. The reason I chose Michigan was first, one of the top ranking schools with a strength in the general management. Second, there were opportunities to develop my network in the automobile industry because I was sponsored by Itochu Automobile Division. But more importantly, my top criteria was I had an 18-month-old daughter and need a good environment to raise her. There are a lot of good memory of my life at the B school, but in terms of academic, like Max said, Professor C.K. Prahala class was clearly one of the top. I had an opportunity to translate the last 3 chapters of his book, Competing for the Future, when it was published in Japan. And also personally, one of my highlights in Ann Arbor was I bumped into Desmond Howard, Heisman Trophy on campus when he was, scratching his head whether or not to take an offer from NFL. And I suggested him to take it, and he did it. I think he heard it. Well, let me put up my quick snapshot. I think I'm going to share with you this because this is relevant to today's topic. I'm not going to tell you one by one, but as you can see, my career is fairly diversified from traditional Japanese company to multinational company of the US and Europe, from B2B to B2C, from manufacturing to services, from operating roles to strategic initiative roles to PE fund. I think I was successful to develop my experience as a top management roles since the second half of my GE time. And the Bain Capital portfolio group job accelerated it as an interim CEO roles in 3 different companies. I worked for GE when legendary chairman Jack Welch was driving the company to grow very fast. I could meet him in person many times, and I was inspired with his strong leadership style. Actually, one of my favorite words is control your own destiny or someone else will. I keep telling my story about Jack since then, even at Pioneer now. I took the current Pioneer's role last year because I wanted to contribute with my experience to turn around and transform this famous Japanese company. I'm pleased to tell you that the company is in good shape even under difficult time of COVID-19. Now mobilizing very fast to launch a new in-car product, which has very unique values that you have never imagined. That will come in the next 12 months. So please stay tuned with Pioneer. Lastly, this is a photo from my MBA time. And maybe this is a team of the Japan Business Club of ABC at the year which I co-chaired. The little girl in the center, front center is Amy, my daughter, and surrounded by my classmate, including, I think, Mac Ariga-san, who is sitting on the right.
Unbelievable.
Sorry, Mac, I didn't get your pre-approval, but I hope this is okay with you. Well, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So our first question is for Mr. Ariga and then also Mr. Yahara. If you could share with the students, where did you find your success? One of the biggest decisions that our current students need to make is the field of business that they want to enter into. So what influenced you to pursue your particular field of occupation, and how did your studies at Ross, impact your career path? So first, Mr. Ariga.
Okay. Let me go back to the chart again. I have told you that C.K. Prahalat has changed my life with the word that as a leader, you have to hold your belief and stick to that belief. And I rigidly followed his instructions. That's why I changed my job 8 times, which is a rare thing for a Japanese business person. But I think it was also relevant to Shiro and Yoko as well, because they have changed jobs so many times. But for me, the reason that I went to the business school, as well as what I studied there, was this notion of organizational climate thing and the difference or comparison between US and Japan. 30 years ago, I was an expat from a Japanese company to US working in Ecorse, Michigan in a steel plant. And at the time, it was said that Japan is a seniority-based people system and US is individualistic or performance-oriented. And it was probably still true today. But at the time, when you look at the white-collar workforce, yes, it was seniority in Japan and performance in the US. But when you look at the blue-collar workforce, for instance, the shop floor, you don't become a general foreman of a factory if you're not good, even though you're old or senior. Or you don't become a store manager if you're not good. So for the blue collar workforce in Japan, it was performance based. On the other hand, if you look at the US for the blue collar workers, because of the very strong labor union, especially in the industries like automotive and steel, it was a rigid seniority. When there's a layoff, the younger employees released first. So I thought this was interesting that for the white collar workforce, seniority in Japan, performance in the US, but for the blue collar workforce, it's the performance in Japan and seniority in the US, total opposite. And I thought this was one of the keys in managing a global organization. And that's how I got into being interested in the people stuff. And I wanted to study about organizational behavior, leadership, labor relations, those kind of things. And hey, Michigan's Business School happened to be one of the best in this category. That's why I went to Ross. At the time, it was Michigan Business School. And these are the kind of things that I majored in. And I happen to make a living out of these things in terms of organizational behavior, leadership. So it was the key in selecting a business school, but at the same time, it was the key in building my career and the things that I learned at Ross.
Wonderful. And then Mr. Yahara?
Sure. Rather than answering to your questions, I think I have some suggestion to the audience. I think the audience is the majority is current MBA students or in the school. I think when you choose the field of business, to enter or as a next step, I suggest to begin the marketing, imagining how you want to tag yourself, right? For example, I think my current tag is something like this: experienced Japanese CEO who can effectively turn around and transform the business, either Japanese company or multinational companies. But entrepreneurship is not in my tag, unfortunately, because I'm better to fix and grow the business rather than creating your own new business from zero. I know that. And also, I suggest to think about what kind of backbone you want to develop as your expertise, build upon what you have done before when making a career decision. Try not to be afraid of taking risk, because no risk, no opportunity to develop, right? I think actually you should take a risk as long as you have done due diligence of the next job and you think the risk can be managed, not crushing your career. As long as it's not crushing your career, I think you should take the risk. For me, personally, I think I made a kind of a decision taking the risk is 2 times in my career life. First time is when I decided to leave a Japanese trading house, Itochu. Well, Itochu is a good company, at least for the Japanese people. But after 12 years working for the company, I chose to, to take a role, take a job of GE, which is a even greater company globally, but not much known as a Japanese. So people surrounding me thought, I'm taking a more risk. I should stay at the company. But for me personally, I sort of staying at the company. It's not a risk, but it's slowing down my career advancement. And the risk I was going to take to join GE at the time was even I could manage because I did some due diligence, which means simply, meeting with a lot of Japanese colleagues who were already working for GE, meeting with those people, feeling the passion and the great opportunity to grow as a career. Well, this is a place I should move into. And once you are in, I think I try to stick to the job, for at least 3, 4, 5 years in one role. Every 1 year, I had an opportunity to be offered, new roles such as a Six Sigma or e-business or small business or CRM. But it's always good as long as you get an offer from the company you work for and you take the risk, and it's already kind of given that when you take it, you will be supported by the whole company of whole people. So be confident and take the risk. That's my suggestion. I'll stop here.
Wonderful. And then Mr. Ariga, if you could follow up on that comment, is there a particular decision in your career that you would say was the hardest one you had to make? And what influenced you to make that particularly hard decision, and what was the outcome of that decision?
Yeah, I think the biggest one in my career was from transitioning from a typical Japanese company to a global company, which was from a Japanese steel company, JFE, to General Motors, obviously a US-based global company. Everything was different. Everything was different. Let me use the chart to support my point. GM, I'd say 60 years ago, was an international company producing things in the US and exporting things to the outside of US. 30 years from then, it became a multinational companies having US still very strong core, but also the operations in Asia, Europe growing, and they're loosely linked. And in the 21st century, GE, IBM, HP, all the same, but the country no longer meant anything. It was a global organization. So I think the global organization have evolved in these 3 stages, and most of the US-based multinational companies are already in this global phase, as opposed to 99% of the Japanese companies are still in this international phase, one towards the left. So I shifted from this one in the left-hand side, international mode or Japan-centric mode, to a global mode. And that was the biggest jump. And relating to my original point of the seniority versus performance-based, it was the move from a seniority-based organization to a performance-based organization. It was the major jump and a challenge. And hopefully, and I think I have made that jump in a successful manner. And that's why I'm here today.
Wonderful. All right, great. The next question is from Ms. Nomura and Ms. Oto. We face changes in our environment frequently, and we obviously also face a lot of changes over the course of our career. What is the greatest change that you have faced in your career? And what's been the most important thing to keep in mind when encountering changes? If you could start, Ms. Nomura.
Sure. I think a shift from a Japanese traditional company to a tech VC in the US was my biggest change in my career because it's a different industry and different size in a different country with different language and business culture. So I went through a steep learning curve, but I can suggest there are 3 points that I think are important at this type of situation, especially in the initial 6 months. These are not skill sets, but more like mindsets. First thing is keep yourself open-minded and learn by doing. Some things are quicker if you get your hands dirty. So in addition to like joining every single meeting that you are allowed to attend, take every opportunity and learn from them by doing small things, even like documentation or tidying up folders and stuff like that, and try to get familiar with what is going on at the company. This may sound too simple, but it helped me to understand the company and how it works in the industry. And especially because I worked for a startup type of very small, unstructured company back then. And a lot of things, processes were not structured at that time. So it helped me understand that, kind of like figure out the area that could be improved from, with my experience of working for a large corporation. So I was able to bring in that type of, new processes type of thing. And then the second point is leverage your unfamiliarity as a fresh perspective instead of being intimidated. This includes my self-reflection of something I could have done better, at my experience, but instead of being scared of completely unknown world, think of it as your opportunity to bring in new perspective, again, including operational processes, how to organize events, meeting style, and what kind of tools you use for CRM, etc. Those small things, but don't feel, I don't know anything about industry, but more like, bringing in, try to bring in your perspective as a objective perspective to that industry. People sometimes don't realize those type of different perspectives. And then the third part is, I think this is very important, but to make sure what you do aligns with what's important to you. Eventually, wherever you are, whatever you do, if you're doing what you love, matters the most. So like try to think what's your values are and follow your passion, and then you'll enjoy whatever environment you are in.
Fantastic. And then Ms. Otto?
Yes. The change in life could mean many different things to different persons. And in my case, I am originally from Hiroshima, Japan, which is 800 kilometers away from Tokyo, from pretty much nowhere. And I did not know much about US. I did not know much about Tokyo or business or anything probably when I first started at University of Michigan. But as I met my classmates who had exceptional backgrounds, or often they were supported by the government or the companies, I was shocked. But at the same time, I was very honored that now at Michigan, if you do what you believe is good, and if you do well, you are you can start anything, and you do not need to worry or think too much about where you're from, what you have done before, where you are today. And that changed perspectives in my life. It's not like I became, I'm very proud of myself and a big nose, but you can do anything. It's something that I learned during that 2 years. Now, during the school days, I wished that every day that a day have like 50 hours, because there are so many things that you can do in a day, as you know, class and group work and job interviews and speakers and footballs and musics, blah, blah, blah. But that's also a big change in my life, that you need to choose what you do today. And that was a new practicing ground for me. Now, after I graduated Michigan, I came back to Japan, and it was a challenging time to look for a job. Actually, it was in 1993, and it went into even worse 5 years later. But I was lucky that I had decent jobs at SC Johnson Works and then General Motors. Now, everywhere I go, I was the first woman doing this. I was the first woman in manager. I was the first woman bucho in General Motors outside of US. Great. Then, I get nervous. Well, I do researches and so on, but there are no right answer. So you need to do what you believe is important and then just try it. And I'm sure that you will find in the future that many times you're given opportunities and then they ask you, can you do it? You're good. You are the first woman manager. Can you do it? Who knows? And just go and do it. You are out of Michigan. You have lots of resources. You spend 24 hours every day working hard, playing hard. So just try it. So two things that I suggest you to do therefore is just number one, just do your homework. Same thing at school, same thing when you're in the business. Like Shiro-san says, when you're changing your job, do your homework. Just keep doing it. Don't forget, you're smart, you're good, you will develop your career, but always do your homework. Number two, very different perspective, but believe that you're a lucky person, okay? You're in Michigan, you're lucky, you have great classmates, you're lucky. So believe what you're a lucky person and just turn it into good vibes. And last suggestion is, and once in a while, remember that you have good classmates. When I'm in trouble, I call up Ariga-san, and Ariga-san gives me totally different perspectives, but Michigan gave me a lifetime friends. They go to different fields, and I find that is very valuable. So once in a while, remember that you have good friends from school and classmates, and your future is bright.
Wonderful, thank you. So our next question is for Mr. Shimoda, and then Ms. Nomura, and then Ms. Oto. So the question is, relative to its developed economy peers, Japan is often described as having an aging population with over 20% of its population over the age of 65. What do you see as being the macroeconomic opportunities for Japan's next stage of economic growth? What have been the opportunities at your company for growth? And given the shortage of key labor in certain areas of the Japanese economy, how have certain government initiatives, whether it be expanded female labor participation or more liberalized immigration policies or extending the retirement age, how have those either helped your company or have any of those, or perhaps have those initiatives not had much of an impact on your company? So Mr. Shimoda, if you could start us off.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. So as Professor said, Japan is a forefront company of the aging population, in which the over 65 years population is now 28.7% in 2020. And the ratio is still increasing. So its working age population started shrinking in 1995, and the total population is falling since 2008. So I think that the point is not only Japan is facing with this challenging, but also the other Asian economic power like China or South Korea, Singapore, and Thailand. So I would like to share you some information. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to show you some Nikkei reporting about some statistics. So you can see the headline is Asia's most aging fears begin to come true. So by the way, the student of University of Michigan can check the Nikkei reporting at the library, so you can check it later. So according to the articles, from 2020 to 60, the working age population are projected to decline 20 to 30% in Japan, China, and South Korea. So it means the Asian population would bring negative impact on Japanese economy by the declining of the working age population, and also by slowing down of the Asian economic growth. And also, it is reported that the Japanese company tend to cut back on domestic impact because of the declining of Japanese consumer or shrinking Japanese market. And the Japanese younger generation have already in saving mode because of the fear of the future uncertainty. So yes, so there's a huge argument in Japan how to cope with this aging population. But to be honest, I myself am not so pessimistic. So I think that digitalization and globalization, diversity and recruitment extension would be the key in response to this aging society. So for example, in my company, Nikkei, AI has already started writing articles instead of reporters in the last 2-3 years. And now we can be more efficient to check, the leaders' interest or clients' demands by using data analysis. And we are now trying to increase our leaders by using digital equipment like, the digital media or digital, for example, webinars. So such a kind of, the trial would be, I believe, that would overcome, this aging population. So my conclusion is we could overcome these matters and at least, the moderate the negative impact of aging society by digitalization or globalization. So yeah, that's all. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Professor.
Thank you. And Ms. Nomura-san, next.
Sure. So I don't work in Japan anymore, at least not in the past 7 years. So I don't think I'm the right person to answer to the Japanese government policy part, regarding that, how Japanese companies are adapting this situation. But I do hope Japan takes this aging society as an opportunity to adapt to a more diverse work environment, including female and immigrant career advancement, and become more competitive globally. As many of you may already know, diverse work environment create a more competitive business. So I do hope Japan, is going to adapt to that kind of environment more than ever. And also, work style transformation has been accelerated by COVID-19, I do feel, such as like work from home and more distributed work styles and stuff like that. And I think this could be a great opportunity for broader potential workforce, including women who kind of had to give up, their career after marriage or having kids, because of the Japanese tradition. Those people could be able to come back to workforce. So I think, of course, COVID-19 is not a good thing, but we could take advantage of this situation as a business culture advancement in Japan.
Great. And Ms. Oto?
Yes. First, the working environment in general seems to be increasingly more flexible and physically, as Nomura-san said, the COVID-19 has dramatically changed Japanese companies and Japanese people's working style. There are lots of remote work just started, even by the companies who long time commented that it's impossible to do their work remotely. Now, structurally, also, there are more flexibilities I find. And I'd like to refer to my company. The company that I have is an independent company, and it offers clients to hire CFO or executives on a time-limited basis, either on contract base or limited time, limited months, limited hours, and so on. Now, there is an increasing need for it. And it's different from old-time part-timer concept, which has been popular in Japan, but more for the opportunities for the aging populations, aging generations to remain effective in the economy, I believe. And I find that it's not just myself, but there are several businesses who are finding opportunities in there. This makes the clients to become able to hire skilled resources without much commitment, because many of the companies are under tight headcount controls, and also provides the resource side to be able to offer in an effective time and effective style. It's not only for the old people, but like Nomura-san said, it does help female to come back from childbirth or family care and so on, and not back to the bottom of the ladder, but to the middle management or the executive level. So those structural flexibility, I find, will promote the change of the business work style in Japan. Now, for the female in the workforce, I was going to comment that I have not had too much serious problems during while I was developing my career. But then a few days ago, some sad news came out, and I have to admit that there's still someone higher up who probably needs education, what's good and what's not good, to motivate women to do their best today. But I'm not to criticize any particular person's particular comments. I think it's obvious that he made a wrong comment. But at the same time, during the clubhouse that night, I was listening to Ms. Taniguchi, who is the leader or chief of rugby, new rugby league in Japan. And if you know, that is one of the groups who was accused for women speaking too much in the business conference. Now, it's interesting that among women, we started talking about why we speak long. And I'm sure that Shiro-san, for example, is thinking that, well, Yoko is speaking long again. But we don't criticize each other because we have some shared background. Well, Michigan is one, and probably we're in the same generation. So those shared culture, shared background, shared value should change Japanese concept and virtue a lot. Here, for the women's communication style in Japan, there is a unique value called kawaii. And I myself grew up totally believing that when I answer the phone, I should speak with high pitch, mosh mosh, and not hello. Right? And when someone's speaking, I should be saying hi, hi, not like, would you please repeat it again because it wasn't clear to me. Now that value sometimes force Japanese women to choose between being popular and being effective. And that needs to change. And that probably takes a little bit of time too. The last company that I was working for was LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, Diageo. And that is a French company, and quite a few female on the global executive positions. Now, one of them, very interesting person, come to Japan repeatedly and try to teach female executives, suggesting that try to be a kakkoi leader, not kawaii manager. And she repeated saying that it's not continuous. One is not an extension of the other. So if you want to be a kakkoi leader, or there are several ways to do. One is mimic how men manage the team, how men are educated, And it doesn't mean that it just shut up in the meeting and don't speak up, but tone of the voice, mannerism, and the way to choose the subject. There are certain communications that Japanese women can change from now. And I find that it's a big opportunity. It's not like we're as smart, of course, and we are as capable as men or others or whatever. But there's a certain uniqueness in the communication style in Japan, we think. And one way to think is that you can choose. You can still go on a kawaii line, but you can try the kakoi line, and you can choose of them. And in one of the searches last year, 2020 March, still 51% of the listed companies do not have any woman on their board. That's sad, but that means an opportunity for us. So again, the future is bright. I think there are lots of things that Japanese women can do over the next 5 to 10 years. And now that bad news came out, that the society is also expecting Japanese women to play different roles now more than ever. So here is the new time coming.
Wonderful. So our next question is for Mr. Shimoda, Mr. Ariga, and Mr. Yahara. The question is, Japan being one of the leading countries in operations and technology, currently faces competition with and adaptation to IT-led innovation. Where do you see the opportunities and the issues, and how do you think Japan can keep up with such competition? Mr. Shimoda, could you start us off?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. So Japan is well known as a the leading country of technology, but the technological advantage is in hardware, like a hybrid car or robots or something like that, not in internet service or cloud technology or software development. And actually, so this is one of the reasons why the Japanese society have failed to manage the spread of COVID-19. For example, it takes a long time to provide, the supporting money and the mask to each household with lots of paperwork. And the sharing of the infection information has been stymied even nowadays in the state of emergency. So from journalist point of view, I'd like to show you some articles. Yep, you can see it. So this article reported about the Japanese government has recently decided to digitalize all administrative procedure from using traditional hanko stamp and the piles of paper application. And actually, during the state of emergency, some amount of the employees have to come to office just, to put the hanko stamp on the papers and to deal with, the paper application. So yes, again, Japan is a leading country of technology, but they don't have any advantage on the internet service or software development. So that's a point. And on the right side, I show you some statistics. It's actually the Zoom polling survey. And recently I organized the webinars, and I made the polling more than 1,000 Nikkei leaders to ask which country would be the leading country of digital transformation. And the result was really impressive. The more than 70% of our leaders chose the United States and China, and 46% for India, and only 5% of them answered Japan would be the leading country. So that's one of the problem for Japanese industry, I think. So the professor asked us, how to survive this global tech competition. And actually nowadays, the Japanese government and the business society is now considering to strengthen its digital partnership with India. So India has a huge advantage on software development and the internet service and the cloud technology. And India is also the country produce more than 1.5 million tech talented graduates every year. So I think that this kind of the pairing, I mean Japan and India or Japan and the other country will improve IT technology in Japanese companies, and we also provide opportunity to change Japanese business society more productive and more greener future. Yes, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Mr. Ariga, if you could start us off next.
Yes. I think there's no one correct answer, but I can think of a couple of directions or possibilities. One is the open approach, and the other is focused approach. And the open approach, I would like to go back to Yoko's comment about women expected to be obedient. And I think exact same thing could be said for seniors and juniors. As a staff, you are supposed to not defy what your boss is saying. That was the traditional Japanese culture. Exactly same as the women versus men or the senior and junior. Those things is changing and have to change. Same thing with, that was about the generation, but same thing with gender, same thing with nationality. So going open, going diversified, globalized, that's one approach, open approach. The focused approach is a niche strategy. Japan has some advantages in very focused fields like eyeglasses or blue jeans or animations. In those very narrow niche fields, Japan has the best products in the world. So creating barriers to entry and focusing on a narrow area where you can win in the world. Those are the two types of approach that I can think of at this point.
Wonderful. And Mr. Yahara?
Sure. Well, I think the question is how can Japan be more competitive in this IT-led innovation happening in the world, right? And I think there are obviously opportunities and challenges. Opportunity side, I think Japanese has a DNA of innovation, and Japanese can make a big change, transformation. Like when Edo era was the samurai days finished and changed to Edo, I mean Meiji, and the major shift was led by a young generation, like all the key players was in 20s, right? So we have done it, and why can't we do it now, right? But talking about business, I think there's a system in Japan, Japanese businesses, which is every company hired a new graduate in the month of April, started the same time, so they follow all the way through the career, 20, 30, 40 years, and seniority system is just very fixed because of the system. Now it's gradually changing, and so I think it is only the accelerating because they don't appreciate the one-time hire. There is many mobility in the job market, and the people are ready to switch the jobs these days, right? And which is supported by the information available and supported by the IT and the internet, right? So that's the key things. Once people have the information, they are not crazy. They are smart enough to compare what is better for me, for them. That's one. And talking about innovation, I think Japan is in a good, is ready to make the grow and change. because of COVID, that's one thing, because many things is online, because Japan is a typically offline society, this is changing. And number two is large companies are struggling to adopt the change of the environment, right? And I see a more young generation business leaders and the startups these days, and they are smart and they are very open. And because they have information, access to information, right? And they can develop a network very quickly, right? And I think Japan has been struggling, large companies are struggling because they carry the heavy legacy, heavy cost, inflexible system processes, right? And even though many of them have a very strong technology asset and innovative mindset of the people, but sometimes we call it from a shift from mono to koto, which means kind of a hardware to a software, like Shimoda-san said. I think Japan way is this way. I think we shouldn't forget, we have advantage of hardware or technology or quality control things, right? And the services coming in, leveraging the internet on information services. And Japan is in a good position to integrate those two things, because some data, some services can be provided only with a good hardware, which works, which functions, properly. I think there are many service company, IT, especially IT, which doesn't need a strong hardware technology quality. But there are still many areas that society can enjoy because of a good hardware technology quality and services, IT, information, data added on those hardwares. Well, actually, that's one of the strategies that Pioneer is shifting. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
May I add one more comment?
Yes, please.
Thank
Please
you.
go ahead.
Adding to Shimoda-san and Eriga-san and Yahara-san's comment, I do believe, as Yahara-san mentioned, entrepreneurship is very important key for Japan to thrive going forward. And it is actually happening, as the lifelong employment is ending. A lot of younger generation, started trying to create startup companies in Japan. And those companies, are very, very successful. So we do invest in Japanese startups, a lot of them. And, the faces of entrepreneurs are changing from, like, it used to be like people who have kind of like unique characteristics were the entrepreneurs in Japan. But now, like, people who have very successful background, like 5 years in McKinsey or Mitsubishi or those type of companies, those people, like, with the large corporations experience, they come up with new business idea and launch a startup type of thing. So this is a very good sign for Japan to, be successful and competitive globally going forward. So I'm very hopeful about the Japan future.
Wonderful, thank you. So our next question is about the pandemic. So given the time, in the time of the pandemic, how has Japanese business adapted to this unprecedented situation, as well as perhaps abandoning or changing any business traditions? And what changes has your company made to adjust to the pandemic? And what particular actions or decisions have brought success to your company during the pandemic? So this is a set of questions for the whole panel. I was wondering, Nomura-san, if you could start us off.
Sure. As many of the panelists have already mentioned over the course of all the questions, I think that one keyword is digital transformation is the one. That is happening at the office and also different types of industries. At the office, as Shimoda-san showed the example, the changing from hanko stamp and seals culture to like DocuSign type of digital solution is one thing. And also working from home, not like it used to be like going to the office from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or even like 10 p.m. type of thing every day was the work for a lot of Japanese corporations, but it's changed definitely because of this COVID. And so that could lead a lot of, that could create a lot of opportunities for different types of people, including, as Oto-san mentioned, like female and immigrants and people like that. And also like that's the change of the office, but also COVID is changing a lot of industries, what it is type of thing as well. For example, as people who live in the US probably like realize more clearly, but COVID impacted the retail business, for example, very, very badly. And like a lot of like restaurants and retail stores adapted to accelerated the e-commerce adaptation and delivery services and pickup services, stuff like that, so more than ever. And around these sectors, a lot of new businesses using technologies are coming up. So up to each industry or company, if you take COVID-19 as an opportunity and find a way to survive, and and then you can thrive. That's how I feel. So digital transformation is a way that COVID kind of created the thing, and companies, it depends on the company or industry if they can adopt this change.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shimoda, could you go next?
Yes, as Otto-san mentioned before, so the COVID-19 and the following great nesting seems to change Japanese business culture. And I've heard, that many of the Japanese companies have already prohibited its employees coming to their office. But I think, that there's a huge gap, a huge difference from company to companies. And actually, I've been wondering why, the commuting train is still full of business persons, even in the, the state of emergency. So some company has been really successful to cope with new normal, new situation, but the other one has been still sticking on the traditional Japanese working style. So as always, I'd like to show you some reporting to share you. Can you see it? So this is one of an opinion article in Nikkei which mentioned normalization of Zoom is undermining deep human relationship. And the article mentioned, the Japanese business society is very similar with the tribal small village. And as you know, the Japanese business society is basically based on lifetime employment system. And most of the Japanese persons have no choice to work for his or her company with tribal loyalties. So for example, living in some business person need to live in company house and late night drinking with co-workers and having weekend golf. So Japanese business, the Japanese business style is based on face-to-face interaction. So, but however, the spread of COVID-19 and working from home released these business persons from peer pressure and the traditional company rules. And I show you the other articles on the right side. I'm very sorry, it's only in Japanese, but this is Nikkei's special report, actually, which I wrote, explains about how the working style in Japan is changing after the infection. And it is very interesting that 70% of our leaders answered at the polling survey. They realized that after working from home, the everyday commuting just brings too much burden for them. And 60% noticed it was totally possible to do their works remotely. So I believe now Japanese business people have started wondering why we need to take crowded commuter trains every morning just to attend at morning gathering, just to say hello to their colleagues and without talking any confidential information. It's just a kind of a ceremony. So I guess once the Japanese business person was successful to escape from this, the face-to-face, the ceremonial working style, and their thought and idea about working would be changed drastically, and it would bring a huge impact on the current lifetime employment system. So that's my opinion. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Ms. Otto, if you could go next.
Yes, there are changes, there are new things, and the ones that is going back old. The one thing that I noticed from what I do is my clients varies from a major US manufacturing company to the small startups. So the variety of businesses that I'm meeting with today, there's a change in the value. What is elite business and a blue chip business, all the terminology. So the large stable companies may not no longer stable, reliable. They may be gone by tomorrow. On the other hand, there are startups who are energetic and who used to be unstable and unreliable or concerns for the investors now seem to attract investors' attention today. So there is the change in business people's mindset. What is the elite business? That's what I'm feeling and noticing, number one. And the COVID already is with us more than 1 year. Therefore, I'm finding there is evolution already over the past 12 months. At the beginning, for example, one of the startups, the environment, they're producing and selling very environmentally free products. I first thought that they will not survive because when in emergency, who has time to care about environmental products? But I was totally wrong. Those SDGs and the environmental friendly products industry are booming. Not all of them, but those who are technology savvy, they have no worry about the COVID because they're already working from home. Their meetings that were already online and environment problems are already still there. So they have lots to work with, and government is not stopping as supporting those industry. So the industry that you first think that it was not going to survive this emergency may be surviving or getting stronger. So I'm finding that this year, November, December is one of the turning points, and that's I'm agreeing with some of the bankers too, because for 1 year, many companies call for emergency status, emergency work style, and so on. But after 12 months or 18 months, they get tired of this emergency period. So they somehow need to go back to normal or old style, or they need to create with the way to cope with this remote work and all this new style. It's already happening. So by end of this year, we will find who are the winners, who are the ones who will go away. So we just need to stay tuned and watch and be prepared for the next period, which will start after the vaccine is spread And it will take probably 3 to 5 years to have everything stabilized. But then after 3 years, or I think 3 years is long enough, that we look back and said, see, we're winning, and they didn't. And who will win and who will lose, I don't have all the answers, but is not always what people are talking about. So tune yourself and let's find the industries which are winning, and then maybe around you and where you may not be noticing. And that's what I'm observing this COVID today.
Okay, excellent. Mr. Ariga, next.
Yes. COVID-19 has forced many of the companies to have their employees work at home or remotely. And many of the companies have struggled, still struggling today. And I thought about the reason for that. And I think the root of that issue is in the evaluation of people. In the Western context, especially in the USA, people are evaluated on the basis of job and performance. And those things could be targeted in a digital way as a KPI, like I'm a salesperson and I sell 3 cars in this month. So there's a little problem in manager and staff working remotely. It's digital. On the other hand, in Japan, historically, it tends to rely on individuals and the process, like that person is a character. He worked very hard. So instead of the numbers and digital goals, how the person is working or how that person is very important. So when evaluating a person, it heavily relies on the proximity, physical proximity. That made it difficult for the Japanese business to have work in a remote manner. But of course, the COVID-19 is forcing the Japan system to be similar to the US type, which is job and performance. But there's a one catch. About 10 years ago, I was working for companies like IBM and HP, and everyone was working at home and no one was coming to the office. And there was an issue of suicides and mental health issues. And the CEO said, let's come back to the office and have a group lunch once in a while. So I think the corporations do need some humane touch. And as Japan shifts from individual and process to job and performance, how to incorporate those humane touch in the transition is the key. And what we're doing is many things, but one of that is to promote the online nomikai or the parties, and we give 3,000 yen for each employee to foster that online party.
Nice. Mr. Yahara, if you could go next.
Sure. I cannot agree with what Max said more, but from the real business perspective, looking back in the last 10 years or 20 years in Japan business practices, I think we have been making the changes. We know that we have to change, but changes happen only gradually, and only when leaders understand, the leader push, drive the change, right? And as I said, large Japanese company, the top of the company has been hired 30, 40 years ago, and he or she is surrounded by the same, colleagues, right? Long time. They know each other, for family, right? Everything. So it's very difficult to push the major change, which may not satisfy everybody 100%. So that's a problem. I think the COVID-19 is accelerating the shift of forcing the Japanese business to change somehow. Just an example, in the sales team, for example, the company I used to work for, they have a sales force across Japan, and each sales manager and persons traveling in his regions to meet with customer every day, right? And when the data exchange between customer and the company is made by facsimile machine, right? And they use a phone, and the people, salespeople, have to come up to the office first time in the morning, then collect the facsimile paper and do some paperwork, then go out to meet with the customer. Then he or she has to come back to the office, like after 6 p.m., 7 p.m. to the office, only to report in whatever, in the old-fashioned way, facsimile paper, things like that. Then of course, internet makes it possible to to exchange the data with a facsimile machine much more effectively, and the mobile or smartphone made it much easier. So the sales force doesn't have to come to the office every day, right? Maybe once a week to meet in person with his managers, right? And also CRM and other internet or AI the powerful engines support the sales force to play like one of the top players, because there's many best practices and the lessons learned shared using the tools platform of the database. And so once the top business leader understand the value of the internet usage, then that company started to grow again. But other companies who don't appreciate the value of the internet IoT, go down, right? So COVID-19, because the people cannot meet offline, in person, that old mindset people are only waiting for the change comes. But we have for those companies who is becoming successful, understands the open space that can be created because of online communication is a major tool, right? And for me, for example, I meet with a customer many times online. Offline meeting with customer, it rarely happens because both of us understand the risk of a meeting in person. And internal use, basically all the internal meetings is online using Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and we find it very effective. Actually, I find it is more effective to understand who is doing what or who is making what outcomes. Yeah? And sometimes it's very tough to somebody who are not very good at making the outcome more visible. But it's a part of the coaching the people, right? But I found the powerful. I found the power and the value of the online meeting, especially internal meeting, is very strong. And as Max said, because of that, offline interaction, in-person interaction becomes much more important. I think we will be selecting, okay, is this worth to meet in person or not, right? And when it's worth, and we take a risk of a meeting in person, and we tend to make sure that outcome of the meeting is there, right? So I think that it's a combination of the offline and online communication style, and Japan should be one of the countries who should benefit from this combination of the new style, because now it's very low bottom today. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So now we have some time to open it up for student questions. So I'd ask any student, please go ahead and ask a question by raising your hand or by typing a question into the chat. Either way is fine. And while we're waiting for some of those questions to come in, maybe if I could just ask a quick follow-up question to Mr. Yahara. You talked about how this current era of meeting over Zoom or Microsoft Teams is leading you to be able to identify better who's doing things. Can you expand on that? Can you expand on how it's different now compared to before? Is
Sure.
it more than just who's able to talk?
Yeah.
More, can you expand on that?
Sure. I don't want to be too generic, but from my personal experience working for a multinational company and a Japanese companies, because people know each other long time, they tend to be vocal. I mean, not very specific, and try to speak rather than putting words or some chart on paper, so that this alone can be deployed for those who are not attending the meeting, right? So that clearly understand. So using this tool, Zoom or Microsoft Teams, you have to, of course, you can speak, but you have to oftentimes you share the contents, right? So in the meeting, the content matters, and you have to be very, not only accurate, but you have to be structured, right? So that, people understand. Of course, because you can see the speakers. So like I said, like I do, you can see the body language, and you can use movie, or you can use whatever on the PC, whatever works on the PC very easily, right? And you don't have to travel, and you can set the meeting just 5 minutes after, right? If people are available. So very effective, and I think this is an opportunity for the people or employees to develop the skills of the communication, which is very important to work global environment.
Okay, wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
Professor, can I have following comments?
Please.
Yes. So since the spread of novel coronavirus, I had many discussions with our leaders, and one of the point is that it is very important that the face-to-face meeting, only face-to-face meeting can create new idea or can create the new human relationship. So otherwise, the new idea is not coming from the remote discussion Zoom meetings. It is definitely need the face-to-face discussions. But as for the morning gathering or just the communication with among co-workers, we can use the more about the digital equipment. So I think it is very important to we distinguish what should be really important using face-to-face meetings, and the other thing is just that we can communicate on digital device. So I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a question from the chat. It's about a comment that Mr. Yahara had made about how Japan, had the tradition of holding these massive recruiting and hiring events for new graduates. And we have a lot of juniors and seniors on this Zoom who are, going to do recruiting or doing recruiting right now, and they'd really like to know, how you would advise them, right now to go about beginning their career in Japan. So,
Sure.
Mr. Yahara, if you start us off.
Sure. Well, actually, I think it depends on the company, who is more aggressive in hiring, mid to hire, and there's. And plus, well, those companies may be hiring the new graduate at the same time, because the academic years ends March. So anyway, new graduates comes out in the market April, right? So both. And from my perspective, including a Pioneer, we are aggressively hiring talent, whenever it is necessary. So very open, welcome the candidate. So my suggestion is look for the recruiting information and check the company who is more open to communicate, more aggressive, to hire, because those companies should be more flexible and welcoming the new ideas to be integrated into the proper employees to generate the innovations like Pioneer. So.
Excellent. Ms. Oto, yes.
Yes. One point to add to Shiro-san is when you check your potential company, if you find MBA graduate already in that company, I think that'll make your life easier. And I've experienced that several times. Just one point.
Okay, very good. Mr. Ariga, could you comment on that question?
Yeah, I think a person needs to define, at least at that point, what you want to do in your career as a goal. It could change over time, and it should change over time. But at any one point in your career, or even when you're in school, you should have a goal or image of it. and work backwards to kind of develop your career strategy. And if a high-paying job or a brand name company was not a fit to your career strategy, you should not choose that company just for the pay or the name. You have to have the grand old scheme of things, what you want to accomplish in your career, and the match between that and this potential company that you want to work for. So I think it's a match, and the companies will look for the talent in the same manner, even though if this candidate were super smart, if the value didn't match, like this person was individualistic smart and we're promoting teamwork, that's not a match. So I think from an individual perspective, as well as from a corporate perspective, you're looking for a match in terms of those grand old scheme of strategy and the lifestyle and the values of a person and the corporate.
Great. And then Mr. Arrigo, just as a follow-up, for students who are wondering about how recruiting is any different right now during the pandemic, and any, practical advice you would give them on how to get a job, like basically right now, what would you say to them?
Just be honest and be yourself. I interview probably 500, maybe more in a year. So if you're not being honest, I mean, I can tell. So just be yourself, be honest. It doesn't matter if you're meeting in person or through the web, it doesn't matter.
Okay, great. Ms. Nomura, if you could comment, on, any advice you would give to our students, either the BBAs or the MBAs, in terms of, how to find a job right now, what would be your advice?
Yeah, sure. So before jumping into finding a job in the current situation, in general, I would strongly recommend to connect with alumni of University of Michigan, not only Ross or whatever school you are belonging to, but overall University of Michigan. Michigan alum, as you can see, get super excited when they see other Michigan folks, Wolverines. So that's what I did when I was trying to find a job after MBA. I didn't have any network in the US. So Michigan was the only hope for me to expand my network. So I leveraged a lot of alumni network. So that's something for sure you have it. So you should leverage it. That's one thing. And given the situation of this like work from home, remote situation, you might have to be on board on your job or do interview 100% online. So that could be a challenge for newly coming employees for the companies. But yeah, as Arrigo-san said, you know what your values are, and also do homework, like Otto-san said, and just sometimes connecting online is easier than physically meeting. So you may get a bigger chance to talk to a big person like Yahara-san, Shimoda-san type of people. You can't meet those people if it's physical world, but maybe I'm not saying like everybody can meet Ihara-san or Shimoda-san, but you could get the chance if you address correctly. So just try to leverage that online situation and think it as a opportunity and take advantage of it. That's my message.
Great. And then for Mr. Shimoda, if you have anything you'd like to comment on this advice for current students looking for jobs, but also we have a question for you as well, which is about if you could go into a bit more detail, expanding on what you said earlier about how Nikkei is adapting to this digital transformation in your operations. You mentioned how there's more data analysis, more use of AI. Could you expand on that? How Nikkei is using those? And what is the feedback flow from the data analysis to grow Nikkei?
Oh, thank you, Professor. So actually, no, we Japanese business society need to recruit the more talent actually to deal with the digitalization or globalization. So in the case of Nikkei, in the last 2 years ago, we had a partnership with University of Columbia in New York to hire more foreign journalists, foreign the eggs of the journalists more efficiently. So even in this situation, the COVID-19, I believe the most of the Japanese company has been looking for the good talent in the field of the globalization of digitalization. So perhaps that there might be huge mismatching between companies and the students. So if you keep to connecting with the Japanese company or other companies, you will definitely have an opportunity or chance to be hired in Japanese companies and to obtain a good position. Thank you.
Great. And then on the other question about Nikkei's, expanding on what you were saying before about Nikkei using AI and
Yeah.
data analysis. Yeah, could you expand on that? Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, actually, as I told you, the Nikkei introduced the AI for writing articles 2-3 years ago. But the AI can write an article about the simple one, like the most typical one is a company's quarterly report. The company's quarterly report is just there's a sales and the revenue or some reason why that their business is expanding or declining. So such the reporting, the AI can do such kind of reporting. But on the other hand, for example, how to think about some events or how to think about the Japanese policy or Japanese economy, such a kind of job, the AI couldn't do it. So this is the same. We can ask AI to do some simple job or medium job. It's okay, but really, the job like reporting about writing opinion about the Japanese economy or Japanese policy or global issues. It could be done. It should be done by the human beings. So I think that's the point.
Okay. What about in terms of the data analysis that you described? Like, what's the new forms of data analysis that Nikkei is doing, and how is that helping to grow the company?
Okay. So when I was, the journalist and the editor, we just write the articles and, the editors, they edit the articles and publish it. But nowadays, in Nikkei editorial, there's, always showed some ranking of which article is reading by, some kind of a ranking, how many readers are reading these articles. So sometimes, when editor decided that this article should be number 1 or number 2, but readers' reaction is sometimes totally different from our choice. So of course, we are always checking, such kind of a ranking and always adjust which article should be reported firstly. Such a kind of system we introduced.
Okay, wonderful. All right, great. So let me just go ahead and ask the students to go ahead and contribute any questions that are on your mind, either through the chat or you feel welcome to just, go ahead and raise your hand. Let me go ahead and take a pause to give you a chance to think of a question.
While we are waiting, can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yes, I just wanted to add my some finding, adding on what has been said by Nomura-san about Michigan. After graduation, I worked, Japan, US, Europe, but typically in the US, I met with the people, the business, American business people, and oftentimes, the image of the University of Michigan, the business school, is very positive. When I said, okay, I'm a Michigan MBA, they say, wow, it's a good school. And when they say it's a good school, of course, there's many good schools like Harvard or Wharton, but it's a different nuance. I think people's image about the University of Michigan Ross Business School is more not overly competitive, but more teamwork, hands-on, and very dynamic. And I think that's almost 30 years ago. So after that, because entrepreneurship and those new type of education has been adding on, so should be much better. I think I'm taking advantage of that, good positive image of Michigan.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great. We have a hand up. So actually, June, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much for the wonderful time. I'm really happy to have the kind of communicating with our alumni, and I'm really surprised, the map has been implemented 30 years ago, and then Ariga-san was involved in the first this ABC conference as well.
Shiro as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I just have a question regarding the how we can cope with like a kind of Japanese politics. I think I know, like Oto-san, like for example, said stick with your value and then do what thing is right. But when I decided to come to the Ross, I was thinking always, is that the right choice? And then now I believe it's the right choice because it's what I'm learning is very eye-opening. And then I have a lot of things I want to do when I go back to my company because I'm sponsored. So when I go back, I'm sure I will face some kind of like politics or kind of like conflict with, what needs to be maintained or what can be changed. So I think I'm sure already our alumni have faced such kind of situation. So how can you advise how you guys have like overcome? And also sometimes you guys must be like stressed out. So you must have some kind of, activity that's, release your stress. So can you advise what do you do?
Wonderful. Who would like to take that question first, or the two questions first?
Well, I give it a shot.
Sure.
I think I'm answering your question, two of the questions in one package, but for people who graduated from Michigan's business school, Ross, I think to do something that you don't believe in is a stress. If you are a true leader and you have a belief, sticking to that belief is not necessarily easy, but there's no stress in it. Following what your boss is saying, and if you think differently, that's a stress. And I go back to what Professor C.K. Prahalad told us, that hold your belief and stick to your belief. That'll be my recommendation. And when it comes the time that you're going to heaven, I think you won't regret if you follow your heart.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Let me open up. And do any of the other panelists have any thoughts on either of those two questions? Mr. Yahara-san?
Sure. Agree with Ariga-san, Mac Ariga. And also, I think we have to be, we have to understand, that all the, we are responsible, the decision we make, right? So we don't want to be regret of the decision we make, right? So when you have a choice, right, A or B, and if your heart says probably A is better for me or for the stakeholder, but a situation tells you that B sounds better, B looks better, and think about, when you look back of today after 10 years or 15 years, then I did make right choices, whatever happened after that, right? That's I think the core, the measure that I use for making decisions, either career or business, specific decision, whatever.
Forgot to add one very practical advice. You will have a Michigan degree and that's valued very highly in the marketplace. So you don't have to worry about sticking to or clinging on to an organization. Your market value is high. Be positive.
Wonderful. How about Ms. Oto? Do you have any thoughts on either of those two questions or both?
Yes, it's sort of combined. Not directly back to that question, but I cannot emphasize again the importance of the finding good resource amongst your alumni and your classmates. And when I was at school and shortly after the graduation, yes, I had it's an alumni association and all the big people here and there, but I never was brave enough to contact them. And but today you took part in this conference. You spent some time. You saw our face. You had our voice. So feel free to contact us if we're busy. We'll tell you we're busy, but you're used to having those replies anyway. But if you don't start, we don't know who to talk to. And if it were for women, and in Japan, I'm also trying to mentor some of the female executives. So Shiro-san said, in 10 years, you look back, well, Mark, Shiro-san and I are already in 30 years from the graduation. So we have 3 things to look back. But there are new graduates, you're starting with the manager. But if some of you who are already in the business for 10 years, you're already getting the executives, we came through it. And my personal interest is to see the next generation of female executives stepping up the ladder faster than I did and with much less stress than I had. So tell me, I'll help you. I'll help you interview. I cannot give you a job, but I'll help you to go interview. I'll help you how you look, how you sound, and so on. Because I believe that Japanese women have not received those educations like our American and European colleagues did, or sometimes Singaporean and Chinese colleagues did. And again, I'm mumbling, but find the alumni's close and to take the benefit of your time spent today. Sorry, but not direct to your question, but that's my comments now.
That's great. Ms. Nomura, do you have any thoughts on either or both of those questions?
Yeah, I'll just add one thing, as we're running over the time. So one thing to the second part you mentioned, when you feel stressed out and when you feel tired of whatever you're doing, I would say don't forget about being compassionate about yourself. That sounds like probably too fluffy, but I do think that's very important. Just because MBA people who have MBA, those people are originally very driven and very result-oriented people. So you tend to feel overwhelmed around the time. But I want you to kind of focus on what you have achieved instead of what you couldn't do today, type of thing. So just being self-compassionate is very important.
Excellent. And Mr. Shimoda, do you have any thoughts on either of those 2 last questions?
Yes, and actually, I have experience to study abroad MBA course of Bath University in UK, but the Nikkei gave me only half a year, so I couldn't graduate it. So yeah, it's a really good timing to think about what will happen in the future, or what kind of job or what kind of work you are doing in future. So once get involved in the hard work, we don't have any time to think about such a kind of topics deeply. So yeah, I think it's better to consider more and more in your future. You have some time during the studying at the University of Michigan. So yeah, that's better, I think. Thank you.
Wonderful. So if any of our panelists have anything else they'd like to add, now is your chance. Okay,
Just-
so yes, please go ahead.
Can I
Mr.
just
Arrieta.
one?
Yes, please. Yes.
I'll be quick. We have an alumni club in Japan, which is very active and energetic. And we have received International Club of the Year 3 times in the past 15 years. So anyone who is coming to Japan or planning on living in Japan, please contact us and join the club. Thanks.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, wonderful. So we're exactly out of time, but thank you so much to our 5 distinguished panelists, and thank you to so much to our student organizers, June and Eric, and all the team. Thank you so much for your hard work and for making all of this wonderful conference possible. And thank you so much, everybody, for attending and participating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Go blue.
Go
Go
blue. Go blue.